Welcome, everyone. So glad to see you all joining us this evening. Not only the 40th anniversary of our gallery, but this year marks the 21st annual Abram and Frances Pascher Kanof Memorial Lecture. This annual event that was established in 2000 honors the memory of two friends and benefactors to the museum, Dr. Abram Kanof and Frances Pascher Kanof. The legacy of their lifelong commitment to the cause of Judaic art is honored not only on this occasion, though, but year-round in our galleries and in our Judaic art collection, which are on view in the aptly named Abram and Frances Pascher Kanof galleries in the West Building, and which include many works of art that were donated to the museum by the Kanof family over the years. The galleries celebrate their 40th anniversary this year. What began in 1983 as a small single-room installation of Judaic art in a corner of the East Building has grown leaps and bounds in the 4 decades since its opening, expanding through ambitious acquisitions that span some 400 years and 4 continents, and represent the diverse and global sweep of Jewish history. Already a pioneer as the first permanent installation of Judaic art in a global museum, today the gallery is a model for institutions across the country that aspire, like us, to celebrate Jewish art and visual culture as an inseparable part of the tapestry of art history. Tonight's lecture is underwritten by an endowment established by the Kanof family 20 years ago, and we thank them for their continued commitment and generosity to the museum. Over the years, the lecture series has delved into topics from Jewish antiquity to its American present, welcoming perspectives from collectors, conservators, scholars, and curators to illuminate and inspire us in celebration of Jewish arts and culture past and present. Continuing that tradition, tonight we welcome Israeli artist Sari Srulovitch, a renowned silversmith whose contemporary ceremonial art brings together timeless traditions and modern design. And I think it's such a fitting topic for this evening because it's true to Abe and Frances Pascher Kanof's vision of Judaic art as showcasing Judaism, not only as shared human history and heritage, but as a vital and living force in the present. Throughout their lives, the Kanofs were dedicated and devoted supporters of contemporary artists working in Judaica, a commitment that can be seen in our galleries in the works of artists like Ludwig Wolpert, Ilya Shor, Moshe Zabari, and more recently, Sari Srulovitch. To introduce Sari and tonight's program, I'd like to welcome to the stage Curator Emeritus John Coffey.
Thank you, Sean. Sari Srulovitch was born in Jerusalem, and except for a few years when she studied in London, she has been a lifelong Jerusalemite. Visitors to Israel can't help but feel the peculiar presence of that beautiful and contentious city. How much deeper must be the experiences of those who spend their whole lives there. Jerusalem, both the luminous ideal and the imperfect reality, has shaped Sari's approach to art and spirituality and underlies the spare eloquence of her work. I cannot see this artist living anywhere but in Jerusalem. Following her military service, Sari studied silver and goldsmithing at the Bezalel Academy of Art and Design in Jerusalem. During this time, she worked in the studio of David Gombel, one of the leading advocates for the application of contemporary design to the creation of Jewish ceremonial art. Sari then went on to study fine metal work at London's Royal College of Art, receiving a Master's of Arts degree. For the past 30 years, Sari has maintained a studio in the Artists' Colony, a picturesque lane of stone workshops and studios just outside the old city, down the hill from the Jaffa Gate. There she has focused almost exclusively on Judaica, reimagining the forms and functions of the objects used to honor the Torah, to sanctify the holidays, and to enhance the spiritual life of the family. Her work has received numerous accolades. Most recently, she was awarded the design of the Israeli Presidential Medal of Honor, Israel's highest civilian award. Sari's work is widely collected and can be found in museum collections in Jerusalem, Berlin, London, New York, and Raleigh. We should all be pleased that Sari's most important commission is now on display in our Judaic Art Gallery. And here, before I pass it on to Sari, is just to give you a little bit of the story of the commission. Is I was in the fall of 2013, I was in Israel for something I can't remember, but I went to the Israel Museum and saw an exhibition, a small exhibition in the Judaica galleries called Pointing the Way, Women Designed Ceremonial Objects. And it featured three women, including Sari, who was notably represented by a silver-plated prototype for the Torah shield that we ended up acquiring. I talked with the curator for that exhibition, and then several other colleagues who were all very encouraging about Sari's work. And I contacted Sari, and we commissioned a sterling silver version of the Torah shield that I had seen at the Israel Museum. And that was acquired by the museum in 2014. It arrived, and we very happily displayed it. But over time, I became a little kind of frustrated with the display because the way the Torah shield, as you will see in a little bit later, it kind of looks like an Olympic medal out of context. And I really didn't want that to be the first thing people understood about the shield. So I contacted Sari again, and by the time we had met, and we talked about a project of maybe doing a complete ensemble of Torah ornaments that we would then display as a group, as much as we have displayed the three Torah ensembles at the end of the Judaic Gallery, the Dutch, the American, and the Israeli ones by Zabari. And to top that off, I also invited her to consider designing a mantle for it so that she would be the artist of the whole ensemble. And I wasn't surprised, but I was really grateful that she said yes, and came up with designs that we then had to figure out, okay, how do we make it happen? And that's when, here I'll give a plug to my wife, who is a textile artist, and she brought, suggested several options in North Carolina that led us to Neal Howard in Waynesville as a spectacular dyer and weaver of textiles. And to our gratitude, Neal agreed. And Ruth Cox, who has been a long time member of the Friends of the Judaic Art Gallery and was the one most responsible for the Torah mantles that exist in that large case at the end of the gallery, agreed to take the fabric that Neal produced and shape it into mantles that followed Sari's specifications. And so this was a very long project, as you will find out in the story from Sari and then from Ruth and from Neal. It was more than 4 years in the making, not helped by COVID at all. But finally last year, we were able to see it all come together. And it's one of the great, one of the most gratifying projects I've ever been involved in. So the story of this collaboration will be told shortly, but now it gives me the greatest pleasure to present to you my dear friend, Sari Srulovitch.
My dear friends, who would have believed just a few years ago when curator John Coffey planned this event that the world would go through a long and hard pandemic and other things that canceled this event repeatedly. I come from my country, the state of Israel, and the Jewish people who are now facing a monumental task. Since the 7th of October, our lives have changed tremendously. 135 of our people are still currently held hostage in Gaza, and our daughters and sons are fighting bravely for our homeland. Hope in Judaism has a very strong meaning. As we say in our national anthem, Od lo avda tikvatenu. We hold an ongoing belief that things will get better and that we can make them better. Actively holding on to life to make our lives purposeful and creative. The decision to come to North Carolina at this critical time was difficult, but reflects my desire to hold on to life and goodness. I'd like to thank each and every one of you, the curators, the donors, my partners for creating the Torah mantle, and the museum staff who consistently stayed in touch with me and supported me all along the way. Thank you all. After more than 20 years of creating Jewish ceremonial objects and art, I chose some of my works that describe my journey. My artwork is contemporary and yet very ancient. It is connected to my deepest roots. Maybe this photo of me as a kindergarten child in Jerusalem is the seed of my growth as an artist. I'm sure each one of you has the same photo, at least in Israel, everybody's got the same photo with the great talent of the teacher. This is maybe one of the first designs that I've created outside of college. You know, as a student, you always think that you'll go out of college and the stars will be, and creation will be like that, and everybody will come and purchase your pieces. But it's a long and hard way. It's a mezuzah case. It was made for Spiritus Museum in Chicago for their mezuzah competition. And as if it was worn out after years of touching, like stairs in all buildings, like books that people really read, and you see the human touch. The touch of the generations, as if creates the letter Shin, one of God's names. We people that been created in God's shape, we create the letter Shin. Shabbat candle holders, Shamor and Zachor b'dibur echad. Keep and remember the Sabbath, one block divided into two. Kiddush cup for Shabbat, it's part of a set for a woman that you'll see later. Here, it's two ways to show the custom of holding the cup. Underneath, like Hasidim, and from the side, like Mitnagdim. A set for Shabbat, the candle holders, the Kiddush cup, and then it makes the Havdalah set. They all circle for Shabbat, Shabbat and Havdalah. This is the first time that I use the stripes as the Jewish ornament. The stripes of the tefillin, the stripes on the talit. For me, this is the Jewish ornament. The Kiddush cup is very simple, but when you pour the wine, the wine is higher than the top surface. So for Havdalah, we're overflowing for blessing. So it really works in the design like the custom. Here you can see the very first set where I expose the spices. I come from a Sephardi or Mizrahi family, and I remember my father coming with branch of rosemary or myrtle on Friday or at the end of Shabbat, and we used to just pass it around. And I like that all the senses are working, that you see and you smell, and the spices and the candle are part of the whole thing. This is also, it was created, I think, 99, the very first designs outside of college. Spice holders, like a conversation piece with the spice towers, the European spice towers. Here again, the spices are part of the design. Another Havdalah set, like 3 spheres that sits together, and when you pass it around each person in the family, it's like you must pass it around. You can't keep it on the table, only on the base. It's really meant to be held in the hand. This is the very latest Havdalah set with a little bit of humor. In brass, you can see the spring, similar to something, reminds me something. Another Havdalah set that was made for my solo exhibition almost 3 years ago. You can see with or without the candle. It's all about memory and leaving a dent of the candle. The spice holder, almost like holding in the hand. I think this is going to be the last Havdalah set or set for a woman. It was made for the Israel Museum for a special exhibition they had of traveling sets. For me, the traveling was from one generation to another. So I was inspired from an embroidery that my mother made for her marriage. And I used it in the set. Here you can see the set. This is also the challah cover, and this is the way you carry it. You have the verbs from Eshet Chayil embroidered, and it makes pockets that you can put the silver in. So you have the candle holders, the Kiddush cup, and it makes the Havdalah set. You can see the detail on the spice holder that comes from my mother's embroidery. This is a bridal candle. In many congregations, there is a custom of holding the bridal candle, taking the bride to the chuppah. And here it was, I was inspired by a piece of jewelry that my mother received for her wedding. There is a meaning for those jewelry that many of them were used when the family was needed and were sold. But the jewelry was really the property of the woman. So this is part of the last and only piece that was left. Hanukkah, this is the only holiday that you'll see in the photos. for me, it's a challenge to bring the symbol of the menorah in a new way. Here you can see that it is made with one long cut that shows the journey of the people of Israel. And it stands like classic Hanukkah menorah that stands. Same here, that the shamash holds the whole piece from falling down, like the halacha asks. The same in the design. The left part, that is the shamash, holds the piece from falling. Here it's with a little bit of humor. The mess of Hanukkah become part of the design, all the colors of the candles. Here for oil. And this is what I work more recently. I've made, I think, like maybe 6 designs in brass, very humble, simple, down-to-earth menorah. By the way, in this piece, they're not attached. You can move all the candle holders, and I've made also a memorial candle, a candle for Hanukkah, all the candles that you need also for Havdalah candle. For the Torah, it's one of the first designs that I've made, a Torah shield. Again, you see the stripes that symbolizes the way that the people of Israel are woven together, and maybe an homage to the first craft work, which is the weaving. One needs to get closer to see the names of the 12 tribes engraved on the breastplate. Torah finials, rimonim. In this piece, it was important for me that the way you see it from top, in my synagogue, the women sit in Ezrat Nashim on top in many synagogues in Israel still. And so there is a beautiful view of the rimonim from up. The Tree of Life breastplate that goes with this rimonim. And the breastplate that was inspired by a tradition of Italians and Sephardi women, that when they ask for something or thank for something, they put beautiful scarves on the Atzei Chaim of the Torah. And here it's a silk that goes inside the 18 straps that become one unit. And the Torah crown, I just told John today that it was a commission from a client in Switzerland, that after a few months he came and saw it, and it was a big no in his eyes. And he said, "Sari, I'm not that modern, but I love the piece and I've created for him." He was generous to give me more time to create another rimonim for him. It's like a gate. It symbolizes a gate. We always think that we will go through gates, human beings, we will go through gates to heaven. And also in life, we go through many gates, from the narrow to the open, again and again. And the 18 straps represents Chai, represents life, our life journey. This is a Torah pointer, very functional and simple. The ribbon makes the letter Aleph at the edge, the beginning, the first time that boys or girls go up for the Torah and they use the Yad. This piece was made in 2016 as a commission by the Israel Museum. I remember the curator calling me. It was one of those intifada we had, another hard time. And she said, "Sari, we're commissioning a piece from you. My heart went into the ceiling, you can imagine. And then she said it's a memorial object, which really was, it went down. But it was a real challenge, and it took me a few weeks. And when I got to the word Ayeka, where are you? I knew I have this is the beginning, the first step. So Ayeka is cut out from the sphere endlessly, represents the endless missing, the endless question that we ask ourselves, that we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked Adam and Eve. And then I rolled it on the concrete. And so you see it in mirror letters, what is against the natural way of life. And then I learned that the opposite in Judaism represents the end. And I remembered my parents and my friends' parents saying not to wear t-shirts inside out, or not to put shoes. Anyway, I think this is the reason. This is now, it is part of the Israel Museum permanent collection. And this piece that is slightly bigger, it is made, the base is brass dust, and you see all the cutout letters are there. And it's like a temporary piece, like sand in the sea, like memory, the change shape. This is the first piece of a series of memorial objects. I used the aluminum cube, and each one has a different dent, a simple change that express another way of mourning. Really, the visual language was born from the Hebrew word. So this is shevel. Shevel is a tragedy in Hebrew. It's broken, not just broken, but expresses a tragedy. Kri'ah, torn, like tearing the shirt as a symbol of mourning. It's interesting to see the light when the candle is new and till the end. It makes totally different view of the object. Gri'ah, bereft, like a part of us is missing. It's there, but it's not shalem. It's not a complete shape anymore. And memory is just this simple cube. Like traditionally in Jewish homes, people lived a not finished space, amal, ama, in memory of the destruction. The reflection of the light symbolizes the spiritual, the memory, the change of memory. Well, this is the best photo I could get of the Presidential Medal of Honor. This is from the ceremony that took part at the President's house in Jerusalem on September. These are the computerized design. You can see the two sides. I used the 22 Hebrew letters as a symbol of creation. The world was created in 22 letters. The light that goes through the cut out letters symbolizes the light that the people that received the medal brought to the world. It says in Rashi letters, Itur Nesi Medinat Israel, and you have this Star of David, keeps the ribbon, and the symbol of the menorah. In the final meetings, I met the president. His wife called him. She said, "Let's call the president and let's call Bougie," she said, and ask him. And he came in and said, "I don't like silver. It was my job at home to clean the silver. I would like it." So I had to make gold-plated medal instead. Here you can see the sketches of the Torah mantle that was made here by the most talented artists one can ask, Ruth and Neal. Toda rabba. Thank you. Well, we have the stripes of the tzitzit, or the Kohen Gadol, but for me it was simply a way to bring the Torah closer to us. You know, many men sometimes touch the tzitzit, and that with it they touch the Torah. And here you can touch all the ribbons at the side, and the 7 lines that symbolizes the creation. So these are the 3 colors. The white for the holidays is slightly blue, the blue and the red. Thank you very much.
So for Act 2 of the evening, I'm going to invite Ruth and Neal and John up to the stage to join Sari and me, and to talk about how these incredible drawings became a reality in the galleries today, and this exciting collaboration bringing Jerusalem and North Carolina together to fashion one of the latest entries into the gallery. So if you would join me on the stage, we're going to have a seat and have a conversation. I wanted to have us start off with hearing from Ruth Cox, our Durham-based conservator, who has been a friend of the Judaic Art Gallery for many, many years and helped us on many projects, and was eager to step in here and help us with bringing this project to a reality, and working with Neal Howard, an incredible textile artist, a weaver and a dyer, as you've heard, based in Western North Carolina. So Ruth, you received these drawings, and can you tell us a little bit about bringing them to life?
Sure, I will. First, I'd like to thank John for asking me to participate in this project, and of course, Sari for her design and beautiful fabrication of the clay kodesh. Closer to home, I'd like to thank Anne Roth for being my co-conspirator throughout the project. After searching in vain for a commercially made ombre fabric with the texture to imitate Sari's drawing, we decided it was better, we needed to select a local weaver to make the fabric because it wasn't commercially available. Anne, a consummate artist in her own right, has an intimate knowledge of the weaving process and is connected to weavers statewide. She brought Neal, yay, to our attention and established that relationship. She also helped fine-tune the silk gauge and weave structure that Sari finally selected. In this first slide, we were supplied with a digital copy of Sari's drawing. Neal and I could begin work. The design from left to right were from the high holidays. In the center is the spring, and then the winter mantle on the right. Note the detailed drawing of the side ties above the central image. The elements of the design that were crucial to imitating the drawing were the placement of the horizontal embroidery lines and cording channels, and of course, the fading of the ombre color. The overall proportions of the mantle also required imitation. To help Neal with the ombre toning, I worked out the gradation mathematically from the drawing and sent my best approximation to her. Now I'd like to turn the discussion to Neal so she can describe the dyeing and weaving process.
Thank you, Ruth. Let's see. After I got the diagram from Ruth, I had dimensions and I had a goal. I also had to sample. These are the 3 or 3 of the samples. On the left, you see different sets and different wefts to get the right hand for the silk. In the middle are just samples of the colorways, and on the far right is how I got the ombre effect by measuring and pretty much destroying some of the images that Sari gave me. But after I got all of that information, it was the day to die. And it did not happen in one day. I love to teach dyeing. I do teach dyeing, and I love to say to my students, today we die. And they kind of look at me like, okay, whatever. But the leftmost image is my dye kitchen. I don't have that dye kitchen anymore, but that was where the dyeing was done. It's relatively primitive, no electricity, and the running water comes from a garden hose about 10 yards away. That's a standard plastic table with, in the middle, with a sewer's, I have to turn my page, I'm sorry, cutting mat underneath the plastic so that I could follow the diagrams that I had so carefully drawn. And on the rightmost, you see the red warps being dyed in process. I started with a batch of the darkest tone and diluted into the lightest tones. Things are clamped and measured because I needed control. Because it was important to me that I place those colors in the right spot. So now, after it's dyed, you've got to be warped to weave. All of that was warp. And on the leftmost image is the red. That's from the back of the loom. It was extremely important in this case that all 960 of those threads were kept in more or less the same position so that the color did not shift. Fortunately, I've been doing this for over 30 years and I could do that very carefully. But the middle image is the front of the loom in the winding the warp on process. And you see on the rightmost, the weaving process. The warps were made of, you're gonna be excited about this, 20s/2 silk, which is a lace weight, and the 30s/2 silk is finer than that, and that's what the weft is. That's what I use to weave it. And you can see that there's the warp that is not woven and the warp that is woven. There's rather a difference in the colors. So to preserve the ombre and emphasize it, I overdyed it. Overdye is not overkill. Pinned the cloth to a print table that's padded. You see that image in the middle. On the right, you see the beginning of the process and probably some of how I got the dye all over the diagrams. That was before, and then on the rightmost, you see it's in process, but sort of an after image there. And after everything is dyed, it's steamed to set the dye, and then this was done with thickened dye, and so the cloth is very stiff, and I have to wash it. And usually, I machine wash everything. But in this case, I learned that there was so daggone much dye on the red and the blue pieces that in the washing machine, it bled and it transferred. So I did it again, and this time I washed it by hand. At a friend's house, she has a clothesline and a garden hose that attaches to warm water. This was in January. It was windy, so we put PVC pipe down in the middle to keep it from flapping around. And I did it by hand. But that's what it took. And on the rightmost, you see the cloth, the yardage that I sent back to Anne and eventually to Ruth.
Thank you. Okay. Because the Torah was, an actual Torah was not going to underlie the mantle, a form had to be made to support the ornamental cloth. Fortunately, I had a basic wooden armature, which I'd made for the fabrication of the other Torah mantles. That's the wooden structure you can see on the left slide. Let's see. I reused this as a support while I constructed the felt form over the mantle to hold the mantle. The form was constructed around a plexiglass disc. And I don't know if you can see, but under here, under the felt was plexiglass. The disc was cut to my specifications by Rand in the design department of the museum. Rand and his team also made the final armatures, which hold the mantles in clay kodesh. And he did a wonderful job and was very helpful with this part of the work. As an aside, I was talking with Rand today, and he's been working on the Judaic Art Gallery as an installer and preparator and many other skills he's brought since it was back in the old building for over 25 years now, 30 years. Rand's been involved. So I want to thank him for all his work and that's behind the scenes of these installations. Of course, Torahs and by extension, the mantles vary in size. So after working with a mock-up in muslin with the clay kodesh in place, John and I decided on the final length of the mantle. In these images, you see the felt understructure during fabrication, which would be the support for the mantle. When I first received the fabric, it was in one long piece. So I had to, the first thing was to cut it into two parts because there were going to be two lengths I needed. Once the form was completed, I could align the pattern and begin and cut the pieces. In this photo, you see how I matched the ombre pattern from the continuous yardage. In the left-hand slide is the pattern where the embroidery and cording canals needed to be located. It was mounted to a board so I could align the fabric weave and then pull threads to assure straight lines of embroidery. I don't know if you can see, but here are the pulled threads after I'd stretched the fabric. In the center image, you can also see the stabilization fabric, what was needed to prevent the rather loose weave from distorting. So this was before it was applied. And then in this image on the left, you see the stabilized fabric. And on the right, I've loomed the fabric onto a standing embroidery frame, and I'm doing the embroidery stitching. The slide on the top left shows the pattern for the top of the mantle, and beneath this, the stabilized fabric during the finishing of the central holes through which the finial dowels would support the crown. And to the right, I made the cording channels out of hem binding tape to minimize the bulk and just to add a little softness to the underbelly of the cover. Here we see the mantle is completed in my sewing room on the left. And then on the right, we did a run through with the clay kodesh in place to make sure the proportions were correct before I made the next 5 mantles. Then finally the installation on the left, and as this mantle appeared when it was first installed. Now I guess I'll turn it back to Sean.
It's incredible the amount of work that went into this and the way it traveled around the world, around the state before it landed in a case over in the West Building. One of the things that I'm going to ask a couple of questions of our guests, artists, and then we're going to turn it over to Q&A and hear if you have any questions for the team up here. And it really is a team. One of the things that struck me as I was thinking about tonight, this commission and this collaborative process was unique in so many ways. But one of the things that was really unique to me is that today is the first day any of you have met in person. And that's remarkable. And I think that speaks to this incredible moment we're in for museums as a society, where digital is just changing what we can do and the way we do it. We're in this moment of virtual and remote work and restricted travel. And so for today to be the first day that you've gotten together in person and looked at the works together, it's incredible and something that couldn't have been imagined 20 years ago. Each of you, your work, your practice as artists, as conservators, really insists on the physicality of objects. Hand weaving and dyeing, working with objects in your studio as a conservator, historic paintings, working with metal and creating objects that insist on their presence. So I'm wondering if you would reflect for us a little bit on what it was like to work virtually for you and what were the challenges of that. Are you excited for what the digital future brings for your practice? Are you concerned by what it brings? It's just so fascinating to me.
I guess they asked me to talk first. I would say it was challenging. It was a little difficult. We didn't Zoom. I wish we had. We never did a collaborative talk online, which would have been wonderful. A lot of my communication went through John, and then I would get the answers back. Occasionally, we would actually get to email, and I'd send samples, and Sari would send back information, which one she liked, and what she liked about one sample or not the other, and whether we'd hit it on the head or not quite yet. And so that was wonderful. She was just such a pleasure to work with. But I wish I hadn't been as shy. I wish I contacted you more during the process.
I can't understand. Does it work? Yeah. I can't understand why we didn't make a Zoom meeting. It was in COVID. We had 2 years at home or studio, but it worked perfectly. And I felt today that we already met, that we know each other. And there was harmony. They were sending me samples of fabric to Israel and the thread, and it worked like that. It was perfect timing in that way. And it was overwhelming to see the piece yesterday. I told Ruth that I felt as if I've made it. It was so close to my vision that it's unbelievable work, and the colors are wonderful. I'm very lucky. So thank you, John, to find, it's a dream, because at the time I was really a little bit worried. How can I create such a piece? I didn't want to challenge myself. I was afraid to make, for the first time for a museum, such a piece, a big piece. So it was a nice solution of yours, John. I don't remember what was the conversation at the studio, but I remember that you raised this idea. I said, that's good, let's go for it.
I mean, I had the easiest part because it was just, why don't we try this, or why don't we try that, or that? Oh, I know somebody who can do that. I know somebody who can do that, so on. And it was, then I went away and did other things. But if you work with an artist who's got a whole vision, and it's not just a single object, but she does see things as ensembles, it is so, I mean, to me, it's just so natural. Then you ask them, let's just go the full as far as you can go with this. And it would be so. I personally would regret forever if we had just bought or just the Torah shield, and that would be enough to represent Sari Srulovitch. It's a great object, but the context is missing, and the context is so important with many of these objects. And for the artist herself to provide the context is even better. It's just the whole of the vision was so compelling.
Neal?
I really don't have much to add to any of this, except that it was, I had in fact met Anne before we got involved in this, but we didn't realize it until we got involved in this. I felt like I had my task set out pretty clearly, especially after we exchanged the cloth samples. I knew what I needed to do, and I did it. The hard thing probably was to keep what I thought it ought to be out of it, and just go for fulfilling the vision, which was a great honor. And to be able to see it in person, I did not see any of this finished in person until I was here in March to do a yarn show, and stopped at the museum on the way to setting up down at the fairgrounds, and saw the blue one for the first time. So thank you.
So this was really an exercise in trust and a first for many of you. But I think, I just have to say, so I had the privilege of being a fly on the wall when you were all in our labs earlier today, looking at swatches together, looking at patterns, and talking, honestly, doing the things you would have thought came at the beginning of the commission and the collaboration and not at the end. But the chemistry was there. And I think it's because, I guess, of the trust that you had extended each other throughout this journey. The chemistry was palpable, and it was amazing. And it did seem like you all knew each other and went back a long, long way. I have one more question, and then I think we'll open it up to the audience. Sari, your work is so refined and modern and streamlined, and the lines are pared down, and it's just an incredible aesthetic. And yet, even though it's so streamlined and so pared down, as you've been revealing to us tonight in some of the conversation, there's so much symbolism embedded in the works in so many different ways, so many layers, whether it's the seven cords that run through the mantle that represents creation and the 7 days of creation. I bet you could speak to the ombre effect, having some symbolism too. It's amazing to me the amount of symbolism that you're able to work into these, on the surface, very streamlined pieces. And I wonder if you would share with us a little bit about how that symbolism comes about for you. Is it part of a process of planning the work, or is it discovery along the way, working on the piece? And then I'm curious too, how that, not only your vision for how the piece should look, but to what degree the symbolism was communicated to you and came out in your realization of the piece in North Carolina. So.
Well, there are no rules. Each piece is a different journey. Sometimes it's from a shape or a symbol or a letter, and sometimes it's a whole research, like Ayeka. That's when I got to the word Ayeka, just the design process and creating just started. It took me weeks of research and reading, and then a few months of creating. So there are no rules, but I like to make the research. When I start a project, it can be a story, it can be a shape, it can be a meeting with somebody, like all the artists. But and sometimes you find on the way the symbolism. Really, like I've intuitively, I rolled the brass sphere on the concrete, and then I realized that there is a lot of symbolism behind the mirror letters. or like when I started using the stripes as the Jewish ornament, the design process was long, and I eliminated so many shapes till I decided I'm gonna go for the purest. You always make a whole circle, you get to the beginning.
When I first looked at the design, one thing that was really important to me was getting the chord channels and the spacing of those horizontal bands going around in the right place, because I felt there was a harmony in the way you had designed it, and I wanted that to be sure to translate into the physical reality of the drawing. The 7 I also thought about, and the ombre I always thought about, and this was just in my own head, about the Torah and how you fill up with knowledge every time you hear and read a passage, or you've heard it many times again, that it becomes more and more rich through your knowledge and through the interpretation of the Torah. So that really resonated with me, and as it goes to the crown, and I thought the purity of the white and with just the tinge of blue, and it was beautiful for the high holidays. And it makes it prominent from our white walls, which is very important as well. The color tones that were chosen, we wanted to be harmonious with the Torahs that were already in the room. And it was difficult when I made, for instance, the red set. Every period of time, the red is slightly different shaded, and the ornamentation in the fabric was different. And I wanted to make sure that even though they were different shades, that they would work harmoniously as a visual presentation in the museum, because that was important. So having saris be distinct yet a part of a whole was important, I think, as a vision for the gallery. And that was, the tonality that we chose. So.
Well, in terms of symbolism for me, as soon as I have been commissioned to do other liturgical work in Christian tradition, and am very aware of the symbology in that tradition. And so I mostly assumed symbology in this. I'm sorry I didn't contact Sari directly, but I have some Jewish friends, and I have several copies of the Old Testament, and I checked it out. What is most important to me is that ritual objects function not only for their use and their purpose. One of their large purposes is to remind us, whoever's using them, the congregation, whoever's viewing them, of the tradition and the stories. And I certainly respect that anytime I get to do any commission for a ritual object, whether it's my particular tradition or somebody else's. One other thing I would say is that for me, especially when it's a ritual object and sacred, the attitude that I hold when I'm doing the work, I'm pretty sure is imbued in the work. And I was very careful to very prayerfully approach every aspect of the workday when I was working on this, because I did not want, my crankiness to show anywhere. This was not about, this is about ritual and the beauty of the stories. So I didn't want frustration to get in there.
So I assume you took a break after you took it out of the washing machine and the colors had run a couple of days.
Yes.
All right, I think we have time for a few questions. I'll start in the front here. So I'm just going to repeat that for the recording. This is a great question, especially with objects like these. How many hours did this take all combined? Wow.
I don't know about them.
Yeah. Do you know?
How many hours? I don't remember.
We don't know.
I honestly don't know.
I would say each mantle probably took me maybe 40 hours per mantle to make.
So the appropriate time frame is to speak in weeks and months and years here.
So I would spend weekends. I would work on it for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day over a weekend, and then it would take me 2-3 months to make a mantle. It took over 2 years to make all of them, I guess.
If there are no accidents on the way. I spoke with Sean earlier about making the Torah crown, that it looks such a simple shape, but just making a silver tube from 1.5 millimeters thickness, handmade, it's one of the hardest pieces to make, and then to bend it. And so sometimes the most simple things are the hardest to make. Like as a silversmith, my teachers always used to say in Jerusalem and in London, the hardest piece to create is a tray, just a simple tray to leave the clean surface and to work with hammers. So it's not always, sometimes as simple as it looks, the longer it takes.
Well, I anticipated this question because it's a question I get a lot. How long does it take you to make one? And while they were not consecutive hours, all the parts that I did right, we're not counting the hours that I didn't do it right. It was probably 3 months, but that was non-consecutive. But 3 months of hours working every day, you know.
And I think there's an aspect to this that I love, that John too can speak to, that this is a project that this is the completion of a project and a vision that came about over years.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we say, 4 years, something like that. And a lot of aggravation, and you know, but a lot of Sari's time is in preparation, leading up to sketches, just thinking about it. I mean, any artist, when it's one of the most exasperating things for say an abstract expressionist artist to hear, oh, my kid could do that. And it, you know, it took only an afternoon to do, but it took actually a lifetime to get there. And so it's really almost impossible to quantify the amount of time that goes into the creation of a work of art, because it's cumulative over time.
Another question? Right here.
Samples that precede the final product, or in Neal's case, that fabric that ran in the washing machine. I guess, I don't know about recycle is the right word, but what do you do with all of that stuff other than throwing it out?
I would not throw it out. And my experience as a weaver is that some of my greatest successes come right out of my most horrible mistakes. So I've got several yards of potential garments and wall pieces. I'll make some stuff.
Sorry, what about the the false starts and working with silver and other metals?
Well, hopefully, I hope my children won't have too much trouble in time, because I have storage of, sometimes I can't recycle pieces. You know, I keep them and I know I'll get there someday, one day. But I wanted to add that it takes years of work to have the courage to say, this is it. This is it. And you like it or you don't like it, but I must go with what I feel. And you know, I wish I had, I shortened my, my speech. I was worried I'll be over time, but if you'll see the work that I'm creating now, they're just, they come from inside, and I hope that people will understand it and will love it. But at the beginning, I was more, you know, considered about how the public, how people will, if they will understand it, if they will love it. And now you need to go to have life experience almost, to have the courage to, this is it, and hopefully people will understand it.
Even when making the mantles, I would, you know, there was no pattern book or rubric about how to construct these. And I just had that plexiglass disc to start with. And I was thinking, you know, I think if you took each of those mantles apart, they're all made slightly differently because I tweak the design of how I made them and how I put it together. I think about it when I'm lying in bed, as you know, as you do, you think about things as you're trying to create them. And, you know, hopefully they all are okay, they're presentable, but I'm not satisfied with them yet. I'm glad Sari was, though. Thanks.
Beautiful.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, well, I'm amazed that you didn't get together on Zoom. First of all, that's pretty impressive that you brought this all together. It's amazing. It's beautiful work by everyone. But how did you decide on the color, and how did you like focus on that? I mean, how did you make that color? How did you decide on the color? Who decided on the color? Did you all decide on the color? Did it have to go through all of you, or did you, John, say, okay, it's going to be this color, and everybody work with this color?
Well, we had.
I'm going to repeat the question because I know that we don't pick up the first row. So the question is about what were the choices around the color like, and how were they made?
Well, when we moved the Judaic Gallery from this building to the new building in 2010, we had a large case designed for mannequin Torahs. And that was partly to provide that context that I was talking about for the objects, so that they weren't seen as just kind of strange looking sculptures in a display case. Part of that context was to rotate the mantles colors seasonally, as they do in synagogues, which, you know, added another layer of interest. It also added, you know, color. The colors would change, so people would find something new in the gallery. So we decided we would set up. There'd be 3 sets of 3 Torah mantles that Ruth fabricated for us in 3 different styles, but they would follow the colors of essentially red, white, and blue. And those would be rotated through time, through the year. And when it came to conceptualizing Sari's mantles, even before I brought in Neal or Ruth or anything, we talked about, I really wanted to follow the same rule because it was so successful in the other case that would be close by anyway. So why not change them all and at the same time? And it just adds a little more vitality to the display. And so it was settled that we would follow this essentially the same red, white, and blue as interpreted by Sari and in her drawings, and then those drawings were interpreted by Neal in the dyeing and the weaving.
And basically, one of the gifts that I have is that I can match colors without too much trouble. And so Sari sent me images on prints on different papers, and I basically just matched them.
Okay, I hope you'll join me in thanking our guests tonight, Sari Srulovitch, Ruth Cox, Neal Howard, and John Coffey. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening and helping us mark the 40th anniversary of the gallery. So thank you all. Have a good evening.